Yeah, I think a big part of their identity in this game certainly was on the ground. They ran the ball a lot, and Shuck did well when he threw the ball. He completed 17 passes on 26 attempts. 227 yards isn't phenomenal, but he also added 85 yards on the ground, including a touchdown. CJ Verdell had 20 carries for 105 yards. This was a team that was really willing to just put the ball on the ground and get things done. And that's not what we've always seen from them. Obviously, Herbert was a phenomenal arm. He wasn't as mobile. So I think they did a lot more passing with that team. It seems like this was maybe a bit of a shift to running the ball a little bit more. I'm curious if you think that's a product of having a different quarterback, a product of just game planning against a Stanford defense that clearly was struggling to stop the run, or if there was maybe more to it than that.
Well, I think we have to look at the new offensive coordinator in Eugene, Joe Moorhead, and he's the Saquon whisperer.
Right.
He's the guy who came into Penn State when James Franklin was on the verge of getting fired. That program was going nowhere. But then he came in and he helped Saquon Barkley to fully realize his potential. He also developed Trace McSorley as the quarterback of that offense. Penn State was not doing much of anything on offense, and yet Moorhead comes in and Penn State engages USC in a 52-49 Rose Bowl shootout, one of the best Rose Bowls of all time. So Moorhead's credentials as an offensive mastermind are substantial. And if you talk to people in Eugene, they will tell you, and I fully agree with this, that Marcus Arroyo, the offensive coordinator last year, who's now the head coach at UNLV, that he was the biggest opponent of Justin Herbert in the sense that he limited Herbert's productivity. We would have seen so much more from Herbert if he ever had a chance to work with Joe Moorhead. Because with Arroyo, if you remember last year, there were plenty of passing, but it was horizontal passing, very short passing, lots and lots of screens, working the short flats. So it was lots of passing, but not the passing which showcased Herbert's arm. And we've been able to see Herbert's arm with the Chargers this year. That's not what he was doing at Oregon. It was a lot of dinks and dunks. So with Moorhead, there is, I think, a commitment to protect Shuck, his quarterback, in his first season in these early games by establishing the run, not being too adventurous. But I think as soon as Shuck gets more experience, more snaps, more reps, more exposure, you're going to see Moorhead open up the offense. The other thing we have to keep in mind, Andy, is that Oregon's schedule is backloaded. Cal and Washington, the two foremost threats to the Ducks in the Pac-12 North, they come at the end. So Moorhead has a chance to just establish the basics now against the softer part of the Pac-12 North and then slowly build to Cal and Washington. That's when you're going to see the playbook, I think, really open up. And you're going to see Shuck throwing a lot of vertical strikes to his receivers, a lot of the time on play action, because defenses are going to be loading the box and they're going to be expecting the run. So I think that's the larger architecture of what Joe Moorhead wants to do this season, and knowing what he did with Barkley and McSorley at Penn State, a good chance it's going to work out for Oregon. And the Ducks really gained on Washington with the two offensive coordinator hires. Washington hiring John Donovan, whose resume is very sparse. And if you know this, working with me at Trojans Wire, my bold prediction for the 2020 Pac-12 season is that Washington's offense is going to really suffer, and Jimmy Lake is going to fire John Donovan at the end of this season. It's going to be kind of like a Bo Pelini situation at LSU. I don't think he's going to coach into 2021 under Ed Orgeron. That marriage has been bad, and I think you're going to see the Washington coach-coordinator relationship also go bad this year. And you know what? Husky fans hope that happens, because the Huskies are probably going to need a Cadillac coordinator akin to what Oregon has with Joe Moorhead.
Well, especially with such like not situated quarterback spot with them right now, and kind of dealing with that. Like, you want an offensive coordinator who's going to figure out what to do with that quarterback. And if you just kind of burn a year and you get somebody else in, it just sets them back a long time. So I was going to kind of just ask you a little bit more about UW, since we didn't get to see them play, obviously, and they have a new coach, and they're kind of a program that I think is very up in the air with what they're going to look like. With, Jimmy Lake obviously been at UW for a while. He's an established guy, but Chris Peterson was such a well-known coach and did so many great things with the University of Washington. And obviously we got your thoughts certainly on the offense and what that's going to look like there. But do you see this being a team that takes a pretty significant step back? Do you think there's some room for optimism, at least on the defensive side of the ball, that might keep them in a few more games?
Well, here's the thing, Andy, with the COVID-19 cancellation of the Cal game, I was penciling that game in as a loss.
Yeah.
Because the Huskies, as you know, scored only one touchdown in each of their last two games against Cal. And now their quarterback situation was markedly worse than anything they had in 2018 and 2019 with an unproven coordinator. I mean, that game was lining up to be a loss. So now they don't have it. And now they get to play their first game against Oregon State, which was really disappointing against Washington State. So, if we're just calculating Washington's Pac-12 North title odds based on the past week and avoiding that Cal game, those odds have gone up.
Yeah.
I mean, now you still have to go through Oregon, of course, and the Ducks are obviously the favorite in that division. But as far as it goes, not playing Cal, just strictly in terms of wins and losses, Andy, that's a plus for UW.
Absolutely. So we talked about a bit of a defensive team. Obviously, we'll switch to the Oregon State-Washington State game, which was not very defensive, finished with the score of 38-28 in favor of Nick Rolovich's Cougars in his first game with that team. I think you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but it was pretty disappointing game from the Oregon State Beavers with their new quarterback who looked pretty good. I don't think it was his issue, certainly in that game, but the defense just got gashed for most of the game. They struggled to stop the run. Deion McIntosh for Washington State ran for 147 yards on 18 carries. That was hugely problematic for the Beavers. Washington State was also playing without a handful of their guys. I think 32 is what Rolovich said because of COVID, although he was very unwilling to admit that was the reason why. But obviously a team that looks quite a bit different, the Cougars, in the sense that, like I just said, they had a guy run for 147 yards. I didn't look it up, but I got to imagine it's been a while since that happened because of Mike Leach's very, very pass-heavy offense. And the fact that it wasn't Max Borghi, who was out with an injury, was very surprising to me. I'm curious, just again, Oregon State, I think there was certainly some expectations for this team to maybe take a step forward. They looked good on the ground. Jermar Jefferson had 120 yards, solid game for him. And I think Tristan Gebbia looked pretty solid. I mean, he threw for 329 yards and a touchdown. That's pretty darn good for his first game against admittedly not great Washington State defense. But with these two teams that have kind of been in the shadow of their respective state schools in Oregon and Washington, I'm curious just kind of your thoughts on that game and if there's any part of these teams that you're excited about going forward.
Well, one thing to reflect on is that, and let's just briefly mention it, Iowa. I mean, not a Pac-12 team, but I'm going to fit that into this conversation in just a second. But that Kirk Ferentz had the horrible offseason, lots of internal rumblings of his program, former players saying that it was not a good environment, very toxic,
right,
in terms of the environment created for black players wasn't very welcoming. And we've seen Iowa struggle. Now, Iowa beat Michigan State, but the Hawkeyes lost their first two games, both very winnable games. Iowa's not in a very good place right now. So I thought that Washington State, to now move back into the Pac-12 and the topic of conversation you brought up, Nick Rolovich had some very uncomfortable moments with players in the offseason. Several other coaches did.
Yeah.
And there were lots of questions in terms of how transparent, how fair he was being with players over various issues. So for that reason, not just the fact that Rolovich was inheriting a new program and having to start over a quarterback, I thought that Washington State was really going to struggle this year. So obviously the performance at Oregon State on Saturday night was a big surprise. And it's a lot like the USC-Arizona State game that, I thought that the more talented team would impose itself, but that's certainly not what happened at all. Washington State punched Oregon State in the teeth. And so if you're an Oregon State fan, you're thinking, okay, this was the game we were supposed to win. I mean, think about all the other games on the schedule. This is the one we really figured to win, and we figured to win it big. And so for the Oregon State to not answer the bell, that really has to be disappointing. And it's not just the loss itself, though, of course, that's pretty significant. It's the fact that Washington State got a 28-7 lead. I mean, Washington State was just all over the Beavers in the first half of this game. So, Oregon State had this long off season, and we need to make a point. We're a program on the rise. You'd figure the Beavers would come out of the gate really strong, just spitting nails, and instead they got dominated. So in other words, this wasn't a game where it was a 50-50 game the whole way, and then there was this crazy sequence or a bad call or something like that, which tilted the equation to Washington State. No, this was Washington State was in control the whole way. And so what Tristan Gebbia did, it was solid and it was workmanlike and it was competent, but it was done while trailing by multiple scores pretty much the whole way. So it's really hard to place too much positive weight on his nice-looking stat line. Oregon State just got its head handed to him on a platter, and that's really the disappointing part, that Oregon State just wasn't ready at the start of this game. I don't know what you say or think if you're Jonathan Smith. It wasn't supposed to be like this.
That's what I was led right into it perfectly. That's what I was going to say. If you're a Beavers fan right now and you're looking at Jonathan Smith, a guy who was a star quarterback for your team, 20 years ago or so, and has been the coach for a couple of years, and they appear to be on the rise. But this was a poor game plan, it appeared to me at least. And they got punched in the mouth, like you said, right off the bat against what should have been one of their easier games. I mean, there's a reasonable expectation they finished this year with less than 2 wins, less than 1 win potentially. That would obviously be worst case scenario. But I mean, how much leash does he have at this point? I think hasn't been there all that long, but I mean, this team is just begging for somebody to push them over the top, and they just haven't been there in such a long time.
Yeah, so here's the thing, the thing. There's several things about pandemic football, and especially in the Pac-12, where we're only going to play 6 or 7 games, if that.
Right.
And that is that in a normal season, a lot of bowl teams and Power 5 conferences, they go 2-6, or in the Pac-12's case with 9 conference games, 3-6, but they load up on cupcakes and are able to get to 6-6 and get to a bowl game. So this year you don't have those non-conference cupcakes to make the record seem a little better. It's all conference competition, and now with the shortened season, you get very few chances to prove yourself. So it's going to look really bad when Oregon State goes 1-5. I mean, that's what we're looking at right here. And so, but the kind of the thing that needs to be kept in perspective is that Oregon State won't have a chance to get 3 non-conference wins with smart scheduling against schools it can beat. A game against Portland State, get that one FCS game, and then games in the lower end of the Mountain West. Those options are not available. So it takes those clever maneuvers that Power 5 schools can use to make their record look better. They aren't available this year. So in terms of Jonathan Smith's situation, he's going to get time there. And I think with the pandemic and the limitations on school budgets, that he will coach through 2022. But what this kind of a game does, it's kind of a slower timetable version of what Jim Harbaugh is going through at Michigan right now. I mean, Harbaugh's struggles this year put him on the hot seat for 2021. That's right. That's the Michigan situation. So I think with Smith, if he burns the house down here with a lot of really ugly losses to teams he should be doing better against, I think that creates a situation where 2022 will be a hot seat season for him. 2021 will kind of be, the chance for him to rescue himself and solidify his standing. But if 2021 is not especially strong, if it leaves anything to question, then 2022 will be a year where OSU brass is probably going to say, hey, you got to really show us something. So he's he's not digging his grave immediately, but for like a 2-year window, it's making it harder for him to stay there long term.